The air was thick with the promise of a summer evening. Laughter spilled from the pub, mixing with the melodies of the jukebox. A young woman, barely 18, stood at the edge of the crowd, her eyes sparkling with youthful exuberance. This was Kellyanne Bates, a girl on the cusp of womanhood, unaware of the dark shadow lurking on the horizon. Across the room, a man watched her intently. His name was James Patterson Smith, a man twice her age, his gaze holding a disturbing intensity. As the night wore on, their paths intertwined, a chance meeting that would set in motion a chain of events too horrifying to imagine. Their initial encounters were marked by a superficial charm, a deceptive facade that hid the darkness that festered beneath. Kelly was drawn to his confidence, mistaking his controlling nature for strength. Her friends noticed a change in her demeanor, a subtle shift from carefree laughter to a nervous silence. Little did anyone know that this was the beginning of Kelly's descent into a nightmare, a slow and agonizing journey into the abyss of domestic abuse. Kelly and James's relationship quickly spiraled into a vortex of control and fear. James, a man with a history of violence, began to exert his dominance over Kelly, isolating her from her support system. He dictated her every move, from the clothes she wore to the people she could speak to, slowly chipping away at her sense of self-worth. The first instances of physical abuse were subtle, a shove here, a slap there, disguised as accidental contact. Kelly, young and naive, made excuses for his behavior, clinging to the hope that things would change. But the violence escalated, becoming more frequent and more severe. The bruises on her body became a silent testament to her suffering, hidden beneath long sleeves and layers of clothing. Fear became her constant companion, her once vibrant spirit crushed under the weight of his oppression. The laughter that once filled her eyes was replaced by a haunted look, a reflection of the torment she endured behind closed doors. As months turned into years, the abuse intensified, each act of violence more brutal than the last. James's cruelty knew no bounds, subjecting Kelly to a litany of horrors that defied human comprehension. He would hold her captive in their home, depriving her of food and water, her pleas for mercy falling on deaf ears. Kelly's once lively spirit was slowly being extinguished, replaced by a crushing sense of hopelessness. Her body bore the scars of his rage, a physical manifestation of the torment he inflicted. She became a prisoner in her own home, her life reduced to a cycle of fear and pain. The psychological torture was just as damaging, if not more so. James manipulated her, gaslighting her into believing she was responsible for his actions. He convinced her that she was worthless, undeserving of love or happiness. He stripped her of her identity, leaving behind a shell of the girl she once was. Kelly's family watched in horror as the vibrant young woman they knew slowly faded away. They noticed the changes in her demeanor, the fear that lingered in her eyes, the excuses she made for her injuries. Desperately, they tried to intervene, their hearts breaking at her visible distress. Her parents pleaded with her to leave James, offering her a safe haven, a chance to rebuild her life. But Kelly, trapped in the web of abuse, was unable to break free. James had isolated her from her loved ones, convincing her that they were against her, that he was the only one she could trust. The family's attempts to alert the authorities were met with indifference, their concerns dismissed as the problems of a troubled relationship. Law enforcement, lacking the tools and understanding to address domestic violence effectively, turned a blind eye to their pleas. Kelly's nightmare finally reached its tragic conclusion in April 1996. After weeks of relentless torture, she succumbed to her injuries, her young life brutally extinguished at the hands of her abuser. The full extent of her suffering was revealed during the investigation, a horrifying testament to the brutality of domestic violence. The details of her injuries sent shockwaves through the community. Kelly had been subjected to a level of cruelty that defied comprehension. Her body bore over 150 separate injuries, including scalding, burning, and mutilation. She had been starved, beaten, and tortured relentlessly in the weeks leading up to her death. The post-mortem examination revealed a catalog of horrors, each injury a grim reminder of her prolonged suffering. The brutality of her death shocked even seasoned detectives, highlighting the urgent need for greater awareness and intervention in cases of domestic violence. Kelly's case became a tragic reminder of the insidious nature of domestic violence, a silent epidemic that claims countless lives every year. Experts in the field of psychology and criminal justice weighed in on the case, offering insights into the complex dynamics of abuse. Dr. Elizabeth Yardley, a renowned criminologist, emphasized the cyclical nature of domestic violence, highlighting the escalating pattern of abuse that often culminates in tragedy. She stressed the importance of early intervention, urging friends and family members to recognize the warning signs and seek help. Psychologist Dr. David Holmes shed light on the psychological manipulation employed by abusers, explaining how they isolate their victims and erode their self-worth. He emphasized the need for specialized support services to empower victims and help them break free from the cycle of abuse.